The drums of war are beating louder in Europe today, and this time the sound is coming from the heart of Germany. We are witnessing a monumental shift in European security that almost no one saw coming just a few months ago. Berlin is facing a cold, hard reality. Volunteers are not enough. The illusion of a peaceful, voluntary defense of Europe has shattered, and now the German government is reportedly preparing for a move so controversial it could tear the fabric of NATO apart. Reports are emerging that Berlin is looking to forcefully deploy soldiers to Lithuania. This isn't just a routine troop rotation or a standard exercise. This is a desperate scramble to fortify NATO's eastern flank before it's too late. For years, the West relied on the idea that professional voluntary forces would be sufficient to deter aggression. But as the conflict in Ukraine drags on and Russia's maneuvers become more erratic, the voluntary model has hit a wall. The situation is dire. Germany has committed to permanently stationing a full brigade in Lithuania, a move meant to signal total commitment to Allied defense. But inside the German Ministry of Defense, the panic is palpable. They don't have enough willing boots on the ground to fulfill that promise. The warrior mindset that was once a hallmark of European history has been replaced by decades of diplomatic caution and military neglect. And now the bill is coming due. Berlin is now considering forceful measures to ensure that their commitment to Lithuania is met. We are talking about mandatory deployments that could upend the lives of thousands of German soldiers. This is a clear sign that the European defense apparatus is stretched past its limits. Just as we've seen the Kremlin butchering its own arsenal just to survive another month, we are now seeing European powers struggle with the most basic resource of all, manpower. This move tells you exactly where European security stands right now, cornered and desperate. When you have to force your own soldiers across borders to maintain a deterrent, you aren't projecting strength. You are exposing a deep, systemic vulnerability. Putin is watching this carefully. He thrives on these signs of internal friction and desperation within NATO. He believes that if the people of Europe aren't willing to defend their neighbours voluntarily, the entire alliance is a paper tiger waiting to be tested. But this is exactly why the return of effective strategy and real leadership is so critical. Under the previous era of weakness, these manpower shortages were ignored in favour of empty diplomatic gestures. But as President Trump has frequently pointed out, peace through strength requires more than just words. It requires a military that is ready, willing, and capable of holding the line. The fact that Germany is now resorting to force to man its defences is a wake-up call for the entire world. Are we witnessing the beginning of a new era of European conscription, or is this the final gasp of a defence strategy that is fundamentally broken? One thing is certain, the borders of Lithuania have become the front line of a political civil war inside Berlin, and the outcome will determine the future of NATO itself. The rot isn't just in the equipment, it's in the system itself. While the Kremlin butchers its own army, stripping main guns off 1950s-era tanks to keep its modern hardware from stalling, a different kind of crisis is unfolding in Berlin. The world was told that Germany's permanent brigade in Lithuania would be the spearhead of NATO defense. But the latest intelligence reveals a shocking truth that should terrify every European citizen. The spearhead is hollow. New reports have confirmed that the recruitment for the 45th Panzer Brigade, the very unit meant to stare down Putin's forces, has reached a catastrophic low. Berlin initially planned to staff nearly 2,000 soldiers for the first phase of this historic deployment. But when the call went out for volunteers, the response was a humiliating slap in the face to the German Ministry of Defense. Only about 10% of the required personnel agreed to go voluntarily. Out of nearly 2,000 positions, a mere 209 soldiers signed up. Let that sink in. In a country of over 80 million people with one of the most well-funded militaries in Europe, only 200 soldiers are willing to stand on the front lines of freedom voluntarily. This isn't just a logistical hiccup, this is a total collapse of the warrior spirit. The Y Tours slogan, "We book, you curse," has taken on a literal dark meaning as soldiers realize that a permanent deployment to Lithuania isn't a training exercise, it's the potential ground zero for World War III. The desperation in Berlin is now mirroring the desperation in Moscow. Just as Putin is welding mismatched parts onto rusted hulls, German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius is now looking into a Plan B. And that Plan B is exactly what we warned you about: forced deployments. Thomas Roverkamp, the head of the Bundestag's Defense Committee, has officially stated that if the volunteer numbers don't change, service members will be assigned to Lithuania on a mandatory basis. They are already sending out letters to 43,000 soldiers, inviting them to go. But everyone knows what an invitation from the government means when there's a shortage. It's an order in a velvet glove. The culture of the Bundeswehr, which has focused on short-term rotations without families for decades, is being forcibly rewritten overnight. Families are being told to pack their bags for Vilnius or Kaunas, or face years of long-distance separation. This is the price of years of weak leadership and military neglect. Germany's military was kaputt gespart, fundamentally broken by budget cuts, until the invasion of Ukraine finally woke them from their post-Cold War stupor. But you can't build a warrior culture with a checkbook alone. While President Trump has correctly identified that NATO members must pay their fair share, the crisis in Germany shows that money can't buy the one thing a military needs to survive: the will to fight. Meanwhile, across the border, the scrapyard superpower continues its cannibalization. Russia is currently taking main cannons from T-62s and shipping them to the front as upgrades. They are sending their own boys into a meat grinder in steel coffins held together by scrap metal. Putin is trading his people's lives for time, hoping that Western unity will fracture before his warehouses run dry. And looking at the protests in Berlin, he might be right. Generation Z in Germany is already taking to the streets, holding signs that say they would rather live under Russian occupation than risk dying in combat. They are calling military service a sacrifice for the older generation. This is the internal rot that Putin is banking on. He doesn't need to defeat NATO on the battlefield if he can just wait for the alliance to collapse from within, because no one is willing to hold the line. The arteries of the war machine are bleeding, but the heart of European defense is failing to pump. The clock is ticking toward 2027, the year the brigade is supposed to be fully operational. But with 90% of the force missing, the scrapyard superpower might not be the only thing in shambles. As Berlin grapples with its hollowed-out ranks, the stakes in the Baltic have reached a fever pitch. This isn't just about personnel numbers anymore, it's about a direct high-speed collision course between NATO and the Kremlin. While Germany scrambles to forcefully deploy its soldiers, the very territory they are meant to protect, Lithuania and the surrounding Baltic states, has become the site of a dangerous game of aerial chicken that could ignite a global firestorm. The violation of Estonian airspace by Russian MiG-31s wasn't just a pilot's error, it was a calculated, cold-blooded test of the alliance's red lines. For 12 agonizing minutes, these supersonic interceptors mocked the international order, betting that the West would be too distracted by internal politics to respond. But Putin made a critical miscalculation. He expected a paper tiger, but what he found was a wall of steel. In a closed-door meeting in Moscow that the mainstream media is barely whispering about, diplomats from Britain, France, and Germany delivered a message that was as sharp as a bayonet. They told the Kremlin, the era of warnings is over. For the first time, NATO has officially authorized a shift in its rules of engagement. If a Russian jet or drone crosses that line again, the order won't be to escort. It will be to destroy. This lethal force ultimatum is the return of the warrior mindset. It's the realization that you cannot bargain with a bully who only understands the language of power. President Trump has been sounding this alarm for years, pointing out that weak leadership only invites aggression. He has advocated for NATO members to not only pay their fair share, but to project an image of such overwhelming strength that Putin wouldn't even dare look at a map of the Baltics. But can Berlin follow through on this ultimatum if its own soldiers don't want to be there? That is the question haunting the halls of the Bundestag. Forcefully sending troops to Lithuania creates a military presence, but it doesn't create a fighting force. A soldier who is ordered to the front against their will is a soldier who is already looking for an exit. Putin knows this. He is banking on the fact that while NATO's technology is superior, its will to sacrifice is at an all-time low. Meanwhile, the scrapyard superpower is feeling the heat from its own blunders. As Russia pushes its jets into NATO airspace, its own internal defense industry is butchering itself to keep up. Reports indicate that the production of new S-400 and S-500 air defense systems has hit a wall because the components needed for their radar arrays are currently burning in factories hit by Ukrainian drones. Ukraine is no longer playing defense. They are using the initiative to strike the arteries of the Kremlin's war machine, targeting the very facilities that produce the parts for the jets currently harassing Estonia. This is a coordinated pincer movement. NATO holds the line in the air while Ukraine disassembles the Russian war machine from the inside. The Baltic tinderbox is dry and the sparks are flying. Putin is betting that the forced soldiers from Berlin will fold at the first sign of real conflict. He is betting that the West's unity is an illusion that will shatter when the first MiG-31 is shot out of the sky. But he is forgetting one thing. When strength returns to the global stage, bullies don't win. They collapse. While Berlin faces a crisis of the heart with its own soldiers refusing to march, the scrapyard superpower is facing a crisis of the gut. The arteries of the Russian war machine are bleeding out in real time, and no amount of propaganda can hide the smoke rising from deep within Russian territory. We are witnessing a monumental shift in the initiative. Ukraine is no longer just defending its borders, it is systematically dismantling the industrial heart of the Kremlin. Just days ago, we saw a vivid demonstration of this new reality. A massive Ukrainian strike hit a major industrial facility in Karachov, located in the Bryansk region, deep inside Russia. This wasn't a random hit. This factory is a critical node in Putin's military infrastructure, producing the specialized electrical connectors and circuit boards used in everything from military antennas to high-precision missile systems. By using a coordinated strike of Neptune cruise missiles and advanced drone swarms, Ukraine didn't just break a building, they severed a supply line that Russia cannot easily replace. This is the hardware meltdown we've been warning you about. Putin is running out of the three things a dictator needs to survive: hardware, money, and time. Because of the crippling sanctions, Russian military production is at a virtual standstill. They can't get the microchips from the West, and their alternatives are failing on the battlefield at an embarrassing rate. This is why we see the butchering of the Russian army, the humiliating sight of T-62 tanks being stripped of their parts just to keep a T-72 from stalling in the mud. Think about the irony here. While Berlin is worried about forcing soldiers to the front, Putin is forcing his soldiers into Franken-tanks that are essentially rolling museum pieces. A modern military claiming to be a global superpower is now scavenging hardware like a common scrapyard operation. This is not the behavior of a winner. This is the behavior of a regime that is panicking, and the pressure is only mounting. As these factories burn and the supply hubs are ignited, the Russian economy is choking. Sanctions are no longer just a minor inconvenience, they are a noose. Every time a Ukrainian drone hits an oil terminal or a power plant, another piece of Putin's leverage disappears. The warrior mindset displayed by the Ukrainian forces is proving that intelligence and precision can overcome raw, rusted numbers. This is also where American leadership matters most. While the current global landscape is filled with uncertainty, the peace through strength doctrine is the only language that the Kremlin truly respects. Leaders like President Trump have consistently pointed out that the conflict is fueled by perceived weakness. When the West projects a clear, unified front, and when Ukraine is empowered to strike back at the source of the aggression, Putin's options shrink. The Kremlin is on fire, not just from the drone strikes, but from the realization that their bluff has been called. They thought the West would fracture and that Ukraine would fold. Instead, they are watching their own industrial base crumble, while NATO prepares a lethal force response to any further provocations. The momentum has shifted. The bully is being stripped of his tools, and the world is finally seeing what lies beneath the armor: a desperate man in a burning house. As the smoke clears from the latest strikes and the Franken-tanks stall on the battlefield, one truth becomes undeniable: Vladimir Putin is out of moves. The aura of the strongman that he spent 2 decades building has been stripped away, exposing a leader who is cornered, isolated, and increasingly desperate. History shows us that leaders who depend on illusions eventually lose to reality, and the reality for Putin is a slow, agonizing collapse. The momentum is firmly with Ukraine. For the first time since the initial invasion, they have the upper hand, not just in the trenches but in the psychological war for the Future of Europe. As the Russian economy suffocates under the weight of a war it can no longer afford, the scrapyard superpower is reaching its breaking point. When a military starts stripping museum pieces for spare parts, it isn't just a logistical failure, it is a confession of defeat. But the endgame isn't just being written in the ruins of Russian factories, it is being written in the halls of power in Washington and Brussels. The warrior mindset of American leadership, particularly the peace through strength doctrine championed by President Trump, is the ultimate wild card. Putin knows that the era of stalling and exploiting Western hesitation is over. The shift in NATO's rules of engagement, the lethal force ultimatum, means that the next time a Russian jet gambles with Allied airspace, the House will finally win. Berlin's recruitment crisis is a sobering reminder that the transition to a new security era will be painful, but the fact that even a reluctant Germany is discussing mandatory deployments proves that the threat is now too large to ignore. The West is finally waking up to the reality that freedom isn't free. It is bought with strength, resolve, and the courage to hold the line when the bully pushes back. Putin is running out of hardware, he is running out of money, and most importantly, he is running out of time. If he doesn't find a way to the negotiating table soon, he may find that he has no table left to sit at. His circle of allies is shrinking, his people are losing patience, and the arteries of his power are being severed one by one. This is the moment of truth. The world is watching the slow-motion collapse of a regime that chose aggression over stability. If you believe that truth will prevail over lies and that strength is the only path to a lasting peace, then make your voice heard right now. Subscribe to this channel to stay on the front lines of the truth. We are tracking every move, every strike, and every shift in the global balance of power.